Section 6.4, Solving Equations by Factoring. So we've learned how to factor, or hopefully reviewed how to factor. In Section 6.4, we're actually going to solve. Make sure you know the difference between solving and just factoring. So with solving, you're going to have an equal sign, and you're going to want to make it equal to 0. So we're going to want to put everything over to the left-hand side, equaling it to 0. Make sure you go in descending order. Then you want to make sure you can factor using any method from what we just did in Section 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3. Then we're going to use something called the zero factor theorem that states if you're multiplying two things or three things or four things and they equal it to 0, then either A has to equal 0 or B would have to equal 0 or the next factor would have to equal 0. It doesn't have to have a dot in between. You could have parentheses, and that's pretty much what we'll see with these problems because we are factoring. And then you definitely can check your answers by substitution, so take the time to check your answers. So for number 1, we want to make sure that we're in standard form. Really, we just want to make sure we have a 0 on the right hand side, and we do. We don't want to distribute in the x because then we're undoing the factoring that's already happened for us. This problem is already factored for us. So we're going to use a zero factor theorem that states either the first factor has to equal 0 or the second factor has to equal 0. And we're going to solve each one individually. Well, the first one's already solved for us. The second one, all we need to do is add over the 2. So our two answers for this problem would be x equaling 0, 2. You can leave them separated or you can put them together with a comma. Do not put parentheses around them. That's an ordered pair. We have not found an ordered pair. Now, because I told you to check, well, how do we check two answers? Well, we check each one individually. So we're first going to check x equaling 0 into the original. So we have 0 times 0 minus 2 should equal 0. Well, 0 minus 2 is negative 2, and negative 2 times 0 is 0. Now let's check x equaling 2. We're going to have 2 parentheses 2 minus 2. Does that equal 0? Well, 2 minus 2 is 0, and 0 times 2 is 0. They should check. So when you are checking, make sure that your answers do check, and you'll know if you're correct or not. So on number 2, we have 3x minus 1 times x plus 9 equaling 0. Again, we just want to make sure we have a 0 on the right-hand side, which is true. Then the next thing we want to do is factor. Well, this one's already factored for us. So then what's the next step? We're going to use the zero factor theorem that states if two things being multiplied equal 0, either the first factor has to be 0 or the second factor has to be 0. So we're going to take 3x minus 1 equal to 0, or x plus 9 would have to equal 0. And we'll solve each one. So we're going to add over the 1. So 3x equals 1, divide by 3, so x equals 1/3. On this one, we're going to subtract over the 9, so x would equal negative 9. So I get two answers of 1/3, comma, negative 9. I know you're not going to want to check fractions so much, but grab your calculator, put in a third and a third, and you'll end up with a 0 times a number, and that would give you 0 and so forth. So even though you have fractions, still want to check your answers. Alright, so I'm going to circle number 3 for you to do. I'm going to tell you the answers are negative 1 and negative 5. So when you come back to 3, try it, show me the work, and get to that answer. So let's go to number 4. X squared plus 7x equals 18. What was the first step to make sure you had a 0 on this side? So we need to subtract 18 over to the other side. There's no like terms, so we'll just put it at the end in descending order. So now the next step is to factor. The first few problems are already factored for us. This one's not. Because the number in front of x squared is 1, this is your C method, where I just need factors of negative 18 to add up to a positive 7, which would be a 9 and a negative 2. Now this is the quicker way of factoring because the number in front of x squared was 1. So we can just do x plus 9 times x minus 2 equaling 0. If I asked you to factor, you'd be done. But remember, the directions are to solve. So now we have to say what x equals. So we're going to set each factor equal to 0 by using the zero factor theorem. And it's going to be x plus 9 equals 0 or x minus 2 should equal 0. So we're going to subtract over the 9. So x would equal negative 9. Add over the 2. So x would equal 2. So my answers are negative 9 and 2. Now let's make sure these work. So how do we check these? Again, you check by going to the original. So I'm going to check a 2 first. I'm going to plug a 2 here and a 2 here, and I want to see if I get 18. So plugging a 2 there, I get 2 squared plus 7 times 2 is supposed to equal 18. Well, 2 squared is 4, and 7 times 2 is 14, and that does equal 18. So I'm going to check negative 9 by plugging in negative 9 here and then negative 9 there. Now when you plug in a negative 9, don't forget you're using parentheses, so you are going to square it and the negative. So we get a positive 81, and 7 times 9 is 63, and 81 minus 63 is 18. So your answers should check. If they don't check, you either checked wrong or you solved wrong, but they should check. Alright, so now let's circle number 5 for you to bring back, and I'll do number 6 with you. The answer to 5 would have been x equaling 0 and 6. Make sure you show the work on how to get to that answer. So in number 6 we have x squared equaling 8x. Look at your steps. The first step is to make sure you have a 0 on the right hand side. So let's subtract over the 8x. So x squared minus 8x equals 0. The second step was to factor using any method from chapter 6, and we can see that we need to do a GCF. So we're going to take out an x, and we're left with x minus 8 equaling 0. Now that we have factored, we're going to use a zero factor theorem that says either the first factor should equal 0 or the second factor should be 0. X equaling 0 is already solved for you. On this last one, we need to add over the 8, so x is going to equal 8. So my answers are 0, 8. And again, check your answers to make sure you are correct. Number 7, x squared equaling 14x minus 49. I'm going to circle that one for you. I'll give you a hint. Subtract over the 14x and add over the 49 and solve it that way. I'm going to give you the answer, x equaling 7. So let's look at number 8. 3x squared equaling 15 plus 4x. Subtract the 15, subtract the 4x, but put it in descending order. So we get 3x squared minus 4x minus 15 equals 0. We would love to have a GCF to pull out, but we do not. So this is that AC method that takes a lot more work. So a times c is a negative 45. We need the factors of negative 45 that up to negative 4. Which would be negative 9 and 5. So what do? We put those in place of the b term. So we get 3x squared minus 9x plus 5x minus 15 equals 0. This will be the last time I show the AC method, and then I'm going to let you start filling in the steps on your own. So we're going to take out what's in common with the first two terms, which is a 3x, and so we get x minus 3 plus second two terms, there's a 5 in common, and we get x minus 3. Just like in the previous section, we said if these are not the same, we've done something wrong. Those are the same, so we'll pull out the x minus 3. So let's kind of come over here. So we have pull out the x minus 3 and the 3x plus 5 still equaling 0. And then we'll set each one equal to 0. So x minus 3 would equal 0, or 3x plus 5 should equal 0. Add over the 3. So x would equal 3. Subtract the 5, and then divide by 3, so x would equal negative 5/3. So my answer would be 3, negative 5/3. Again, those answers should work. Alright, so on number 9, we have 9x squared minus 100 equaling 0. We look for GCF first. It already equals 0, so that's great. There is no GCF and there's only two terms. So go back to those notes. What do we do if there's two terms? It's a difference of cubes or a difference of squares. And this looks like a difference of squares. So we're going to factor this into 3x plus 10 and 3x minus 10 equaling 0 using the difference of squares formula. Then we're going to set each one equal to 0 and solve each one individually. So we're going to subtract over the 10. So 3x equals negative 10. Divide by 3. So x equals negative 10/3. On the other one, we'll add the 10. So 3x equals positive 10. Divide by 3. So we get negative 10/3 and positive 10/3. I'm going to circle number 10 for you to try. The hint that I give to you, it does not equal 0. If it does not equal 0, you're really not factored in a form that can help you, so we'll distribute. So we'll have x squared minus 3x equals 18. We now need to know we need to make this equal to 0. So subtract over the 18 and go from there. So my answers would be 6 and negative 3 once you solve that out. So same thing on number 11. It looks factored. Oh, but it doesn't equal 0. Since it doesn't equal 0, we can't jump to just setting each factor equal to 0 or each factor equaling to negative 30. It makes no sense. So since it doesn't equal 0, we're going to have to FOIL this out and then subtract or add over the 30. So x times x is x squared. Outer would give me a positive 8x. Inner would give me negative 3x. Last would give me negative 24. And it still equals negative 30. So I'm going to add the 30 over to the other side and combine like terms. So I get x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Factors of 6 add up to 5 would be a positive 2 and a positive 3. Can't use 6 and negative 1 because my 6 is positive. Setting each factor equal to 0 and solving, we get x equaling negative 2, or x would have equaled negative 3. So on number 12 we have 12x cubed plus 20x squared minus 8x equals 0. First thing we should look for is a GCF, and there's a GCF of a 4x. So I'm going to take out a 4x and I'm left with 3x squared plus 5x minus 2 equals 0. I'm going to let you do the AC method. And then at this point you're going to have 4x equaling to 0. And then you're going to have two more other factors that you need equal to 0 as well. So my answer should have been 0 from the first one. You're going to get a 0 out of this one. And then you're going to set those factors equal to 0. And you should get positive 1/3 and negative 2. So you might have three things being multiplied. Set them equal to 0 as well. Alright, so now we have a few word problems to look at. We want to find a number such that 55 plus the square of a number is the same as 16 times the number. So let's let x be the number. So we're going to let x equal the number. So we want a number such that 55 plus the square of a number, not the square root, but the square. So we're going to square the number is, we're going to have the equal sign, is 16 times the number. So 16x. Well, it is quadratic because we have an x squared. So if it's quadratic, we need to make it equal to 0. So we're going to subtract the 16x over, but also rearrange from highest power down to lowest power. So we have the x squared first. We subtracted the 16x over to bring it to the other side. We still have plus 55 equaling 0. So the factors of 55 add up to 16. Because the number in front of x squared is 1, it's the faster way of factoring. Be careful with your signs. We needed x minus 5 and x minus 11. So setting each one equal to 0, so we can solve. We actually get two numbers that work. X equaling 5 works, and x equaling 11. So if x is the numbers, we have a number of 5 and the number 11 will make this equation true. So sometimes you might end up with two numbers. A few more word problems. The length of a small rectangular garden is 4 meters more than the width. If the area is 320 square meters, find the dimensions of the garden. So let's think about a garden. So here's my garden. And we have the length of the smaller rectangle, of a small rectangle garden is 4 meters more than the width. So we don't know what the width is, we'll call it W. And we know the length is 4 meters more than the width. With more than, you flip the order. So more than the width is W, and 4 meters more than that plus 4. So they did tell us one other piece of information, the area. Well, area is length times width. And they told us the area is 320. So 320 equals the length times the width. Well, the length we know is W plus 4, and the width is just W. This kind of looks like a problem on the previous page now, where it doesn't equal 0, so we need to distribute in the W, so we get 320 equals W squared plus 4W. Since this is already positive, I'm going to subtract the 320 over to the other side. So 0 equals w squared plus 4w minus 320. All I did was subtract over the 320 to the right side. If you don't like 0 on the left-hand side, you can flip it over to the right now, because equality of commutative property of equality. So you don't have to have the 0 over here, you can put it over here. So the number in front of the x squared, which is our w squared, is 1. So all we need to do is find the factors of negative 320 that add up to a positive 4. Again, this is where you want to take your calculator and just start making a list. Well, if you start making the list, you're going to see it's a 16 and a 20, with the 16 being negative and the 20 being positive, because you need a positive 4. So 0 is going to equal w minus 16 and w plus 20. So setting each one equal to 0, we get w equaling 16, or w would equal negative 20. The problem is width cannot be negative, so you know this answer gets thrown out. Now look at what the direction or the question's asking. Find the dimensions. We know the width is 16, so the width is 16 meters. So what does that mean the length is? Well, the length would be 16 plus 4, which would be 20 meters. So my answer would be length is 20 meters and the width is 16. So this is my length and that's my width. So we're going to do another one very similar to it. I'll start you off and then you can finish it. Again, we have another rectangular plot. The length of a rectangle is 2 feet less than 3 times the width. So we'll call that w again. There's the width. What is the length going to be? Well, it is 2 feet less than 3 times the width. So we're going to flip the order. So 3 times the width comes first, so 3w, and then 2 feet less than that, minus 2. So the length is 3w minus 2, and the width is just w. Formula for area, again, is length times width. What do we say the area is? 40 square feet. So 40 equals, the length is 3w minus 2, and the width is just w. So just like this problem up here, we'll distribute in the w. So 40 equals 3w squared minus 2w. We need to subtract over the 40. Again, why am I taking it over to the right? Because the number in front of w squared is already positive, and I like to keep that as a positive. If you don't like the 0 over here, just flip it over to the other side, and you're good. Still the same equation. And now look what happens though. Here we have to do the AC method. Why? Because the number in front of the x squared, which is our w squared, is not 1. So you're going to show lots of work that I'm going to give you to the factors, which is 3w plus 10 times w minus 4. So make sure you fill in that work on the AC method and get to those factors, still equaling 0. So 3w plus 10 equaling 0, or w minus 4 should equal 0. So subtract over the 10, divide by 3, and we get the width is a negative 10/3. Width can't be negative, so that answer gets thrown out. Add over the 4, so w equals 4. So what does that mean? Well, the width is going to be 4 feet. So we have the width is 4 feet. If the width is 4, we get 3 times 4 minus 2, which is 12 minus 2, which is 10 feet for the length. So we get 4 feet and 10 feet. Alright, last one, the Pythagorean theorem. Pythagorean theorem is for a right triangle that says a squared plus b squared should equal c squared. The side across from the the side across from the right angle is the hypotenuse. That's the one that matters, and that's your c. The other sides could be flipped as a and b, or a and b, it doesn't matter. I'll just let this one be a and this one be b. So we're going to plug it into this formula that a squared plus b squared should equal c squared. So a is x minus 8, so x minus 8 quantity squared, plus b is x minus 1, so x minus 1 quantity squared, equals c, and c is x, and I need to square it. So I'm going to start this off. You're going to fill in some of the pieces. How do you do x minus 8 quantity squared? Well, that's going to be x minus 8 times x minus 8. Then, how do you do x minus 1 quantity squared? x minus 1 times x minus 1. And then x squared is just x squared. So you're going to show all the factoring, or sorry, all the multiplying out of the binomials and combining like terms and bringing over the x squared. Lots of work in between. After all that work, you should end up with an equation of x squared minus 18x plus 65 should equal 0. So I want to see all that work in between. Now, what's nice is the number in front of x squared is 1. And if it's 1, then we know all we need to do is find the factors of 65 that add up to a negative 18. List your factors, but it turns out to be a negative 5 and a negative 13. Because when I multiply, I get 65, but if I add, I get a negative 18. So it would factor into x minus 5 and x minus 13 equaling 0. So then we'll set each factor equal to 0 and solve each one individually. So if I add over the 5, I get x equaling 5. If I add over the 13, I get x equaling 13. Now remember what the question asks. Find the length of each side. Well, what if x was 5? That means this side would be a 5. This side, 5 minus 1 is 4. And this would be 5 minus 8, which is a negative 3. Can we have a negative length? No. So what does that mean about the 5? We don't get to use it. But what if we had x equals 13? So 13's here. 13 minus 1 is 12. And 13 minus 8 is 5. Does that work? Yeah. 5, 12, 13, they're all positive. So find the length of each side. A is 5, B is 12, and C is 13.